Hello, my lovelies, and welcome to episode 67 of the Prosperous Yogini podcast. And it's one of my favorite episodes because I am not alone. I feel like I've been alone quite a lot recently, particularly over like school summer holidays. And Flo from Flo Yoga Brighton is here with me today. And this came about because, Flo pitched to me to come on the podcast, for want of a better word, but she actually asked me a question. And as you know, guys, that you listen to the podcast frequently, I am always inviting you to ask me a question, and the podcast where I'm answering your questions, I think are the best ones because they're the ones that I get most excited about because it's like, I feel like I'm really helping you. So when Flo came with a question and said, hey, can I come on and talk about it? I'm like, yes, you can. So Flo is here today. Flo, do you want to just I love doing this, saying who you are, where you come from. No, give a little bit of introduction into who you are and what was it you asked me?
Yeah, hello. I feel really famous now because I've been listening to this podcast.
Massively famous. This one in particular is going viral.
So famous. So the question that the question or the subject that I wanted to talk about with you, because I have listened to your podcast for a while, and I felt like you come at teaching in your own teaching from you hire studios, you kind of bring your teaching to the people in Cornwall. But so when I qualified, it was in Brighton. And Brighton, now I don't know if I'm just making up this fact.
No.
Or if, I don't know, it's something that's it's one of those urban myths, I think. But Brighton is supposedly one of the highest density of yoga teachers to people, or per square mile or something like that.
It could well be.
That you can find. And somebody said that to me during my training, and I was like, oh my god, how am I gonna deal with this? But so the question that I wanted to kind of talk about is how you thrive as a yoga teacher and as a newly qualified teacher in such a saturated market.
It's a great question. And I think there'll be lots of people that listen to this podcast who are in their teacher training or newly qualified teacher, which I want to just touch on what that means at the moment, that are listening to this and whether they're in Brighton or not. I talk a lot on the podcast about new keys that in Cornwall. I live in Perranporth, which is on the North Cornish coast, and the next few bays round is a town called Newquay, a really vibrant surf town. There are loads of yoga teachers in Newquay. There are quite a few very successful studios. And I know that I've got a few friends who are yoga teachers in Newquay, and they feel what you feel about Brighton. Yeah, they feel this too, right? So I will come on to that. But let's talk about this concept of a newly qualified teacher. And I always think you're past this now. You've been teaching for how long, Flo?
Just under 3 years now. Yeah.
So you feel like now I'm no longer a newly qualified teacher. Yeah. Put yourself into that category. This, absolutely. When we finish training, we are a newly qualified teacher. But when that ends and what that means for what we do is completely made up. So those of you that are newly qualified teachers, what I will often see newly qualified teachers doing is undercharging because they think, well, I've just trained, and you're missing the idea that you are discounting all your practice before your teacher training course, all your qualifications, all your experiences before that. You're missing the idea that your students don't care. Nobody has ever asked me how long. Flo, have you ever been asked who you trained with, how many hours you've trained, and how long you've been qualified? Has anyone asked you that?
Well, interesting question. Because I can say no students have ever asked me that. No. However, and this is feeding into this idea of saturated market and what it does to us as yoga teachers. Many yoga teachers have sometimes in a really friendly and bonding way of how long have you been teaching, where did you qualify, but sometimes in a kind of, I think, sort of a competitive way. And certainly when it comes to approaching studios, which I know we'll talk about, it's a relevant question, I think, to an extent. And certainly studios will ask you, how long, where did you train?
And I guess in that context, if you're seeking employment for a studio, Like they want, of course they want to know, like, who did you train with, where did you train, how many hours have you trained, how long have you been teaching, because that helps, when they might be making a selection from a range of teachers, make their judgment. The thing is, though, it's part of the judgment process, because like you can have a newly qualified teacher who perhaps might be a better fit for that studio than someone who's been teaching for 5 years, who's someone's been teaching for 10 years. I could have, like, I'm just coming to the end of my foundation teacher training course, current cohort, and I know there's people in there, like I could go and teach a class to the same group of people that they could go and teach a class, and some people in that class will prefer them over me. It's this, there is room for us all. And while you were talking, I would writing down, I just wrote fear and love, because what we're actually tapping into here is scarcity mindset versus abundance. And I have talked about this in the podcast before, and it is so hard. And so hard to get ourselves into a vibration or an energetic place of there is enough for us all, there is a room for us all, faith in the universe that it's not that messed up, that it would, like, there is enough for anybody who and everybody who has that calling to be a yoga teacher, that there's room for us all.
Yeah.
I know you and I personally spoke about this, but I would look on Brighton as the best opportunity ever. That if there are loads of yoga teachers, loads of yoga studios, then there's loads of people wanting to do yoga, and you're in a place, not a saturated market, but an up for it market, a market that is open to the possibility of yoga.
Yeah.
In a saturated market, we have to be really, really clear. It enforces us really to be really, really clear on calling out who we are, what it is, what we're going to be offering, and inviting people into those offers. Like, I know, so I've worked, guys, just a bit of confession here, like Flo has signed up to my Pathway to Profit, so we've been through that process, so I've checked Flo out. Flo has a lush collection of leggings she's gonna love, like, on her Instagram. I went on your Instagram, I was like, I love your leggings. And you're not talking about your leggings, right? And we think, God, why on earth would Flo want to talk about her leggings, which was to sell yoga? But if you made a thing of the fact that you've got like a love for funky leggings, I have a love for funky leggings, right? I live in Brighton. I have a large collection of funky leggings. I now want to just come and give your class a try. In a saturated market, the only difference in my decision might be you talk about your funky leggings.
Well, I was thinking of something as you were talking, which is, relates to the scarcity abundance process, which is that there are a lot of teachers around, but that I saw that, and I'm really like glad and proud that I did, as a great opportunity for connection. Because I was part of the reason that I started teaching yoga is because I have another job where I don't feel connection very much. And so I was like, this yoga stuff, apart from the teaching, apart from the practice, which I love, is going to be a way for me to connect with other people. And I think that is a great way to start thriving in a, let's say, busy market, which is like connecting with other teachers, go to their practices. And I know that comes with like another sort of challenge to the scarcity mindset, but like go to their practices, connect with them, talk to them, maybe diversify your offer as well by looking at what they're doing. And like try and see it as an opportunity for connection.
Yes. And anybody who doesn't want to connect with you, what we're actually talking about is two of my favorite words, which is collaboration and reciprocity. So we're collaborating right now. Like, you're coming onto my podcast. People are going to love this interview. They've heard enough of me. I've been going on about, I've got 14 years experience. You've forgotten, Amy, what it's like to be in the early days. And here you are, nearly 3 years in, and there's going to be people listening thinking, thank God you're here, Flo. I am right where you are, right? And then obviously you coming on my podcast, people are going to check out your Instagram, want to know about your leggings. You never know, you might be a fancy legging influencer any day now.
What do you think?
But it's reciprocity, and collaboration. this isn't coming from a place of I feel threatened by you and you feeling threatened by me. So when we connect in a busy market and we reach out to teachers, we go to their class, we reach out on them on Instagram. I think in a local market, I think it is so much better that you make a personal connection, make an effort to go to their class. You know, be really human about it and introduce yourself, you know, maybe at the end of the class, I really love that, or by the way, I'm a local teacher, and see where that goes. And if you get that barrier of basically, which will be coming from fear, like, oh, you're a threat to me and no, stay away, you know what you do? You just put your hands up and just say, we're not the right energetic connection. Like, and this is, I have no control over other people's actions and responses. I can only control my own. Then you go and find someone, you're like, you get on really well, you're really, really bubbly, you're like, oh, let's go for coffee. We both have leopard print leggings. And you just weirdly end up wearing same but different leggings and take a great picture for Instagram. These things happen, right? This is energetic connection.
Yeah. And I don't.
You've got a collaboration. You cover each other's classes. You do a joint retreat. You do a joint workshop. You promote each other from a place of there is room for us all.
And I think as a newly qualified teacher, you can really underestimate the value that you have as a yoga teacher who's like super motivated usually, and also available, because I've noticed in Brighton that what usually happens is people qualify, start teaching, and then their schedule and their work fills up quickly, and they're no longer available for cover. So it's really valuable to an established teacher to know newly qualified teachers that they can, like, you know, I think I either mentor in some way or just have a relationship with and use for cover. Like, don't underestimate, if you're a newly qualified teacher listening to this, don't underestimate your value, basically.
Absolutely. And that's what happens. And like one of my, just to end on the newly qualified teacher status, one of the most common things I say is there's just no such thing as P plates. So when you pass your driving test in the UK, you get a P plate. I can't remember how long you're meant to wear your P plate for, but in the UK, there's no such thing in the yoga industry. So you decide how long your P plate is, and the likelihood is you'll be making it up. And I think, you know, I'm thinking back to my experience as a school teacher. Like, you're in education as well as your other job. Like, we had, you know, you're a newly qualified teacher for those first 12 months. And then generally speaking, they give in education that teacher, and, you know, 3 years and maybe additional support. And I think what we need, the conversation we need to be having is, once I'm done, let's go on to this next thing you wanted to talk about, which is like foundation teacher training courses. I've done my foundation teacher training course. This is just the start. And that's the mindset. Like, a foundation teacher training course has got to tell you so much. It's really unlikely to fully set you up to run a yoga business. And the next stage is to hook up with a mentor. Yeah, of course, I want to join my online mentorship program, but Flo, another powerful thing that lots of like more experienced teachers do that often own studios is offer in-person mentorships. And you go along and you work with that teacher, and next thing you know, you're covering classes, you're running classes, and so on and so forth.
Well, it's interesting because I don't know that is very present in Brighton, and it's certainly something I know one teacher who offers it actively as a product. I actually just found a teacher that I really loved and admired and was a bit older, and asked her if she would mentor me for a while.
What did she say?
She said, yeah. And we had a few sessions, and it was really great to have that dialogue with someone. But even if you don't have like a formal mentor, I'm probably not doing your business.
No, please, no, this is important.
Even if you don't have a formal mentor, if you connect with other yoga teachers, you will end up talking. I'll never forget the yoga class that I gave when I was really quite newly qualified. And a lady came in and told me, oh yeah, just so you know, I can't bend either of my knees.
Well, it will always happen.
And then sat right at the front in the middle of the class and asked me audibly for modifications throughout the whole class. I'll never forget that. But I will also never forget being able to talk to one of my best yoga friends here about it, and you know, just talk. I mean, first of all, you get to like cry on someone's shoulder because that's pretty crap when that
It's
happens.
brutal. Yeah.
But also you get to talk through, you know, how would you handle that? What are your boundaries about, you know, about your class? And yeah, so even if you don't have a formal mentor, like your connections and your friends will serve that purpose to an extent.
And you create your own support circles, absolutely, and paying attention to those support circles. So if you find yourself in a support circle where you're like, this isn't overly supportive and it just makes me feel rubbish, and I post on this Facebook group and the advice is like, just makes me feel worse, get out of it. I think it's interestingly from an experienced teacher point of view, like my foundation teacher training course is a great example. I wasn't running that and people kept asking me to do it, and I kept saying, oh, I wasn't ready. And I think if you do have a teacher that you go to and you really admire and you'd like some of their input and they're not running a mentorship program, I say ask them. And it doesn't have to be a mentorship program, just some form of mentorship. And that would look like maybe coming to their classes, a bit more assisting in their classes, and like, you know, spending some time to them one-to-one. And like, this is, if there's any trainers listening to this podcast right now, like, I think all trainers who are offering foundation teacher training courses should also offer mentorship. And you might be like, this is crazy, Amy, you've got a mentorship program. Why on earth would you be encouraging other people to start a mentorship program? Well, that's because I'm coming from a vibration of, I know there's enough for everyone. I know that this is a multi-billion-dollar industry with millions of yoga teachers, hundreds of thousands of yoga teachers, and then it's room for us all. And mentorship is one of the biggest things that is missing.
Yeah, and it's part of for me, it's like, it's part of lifting other people up, you know, like I really love saying that yoga is feminist, and I think it should be, because it's so female dominated. It gives you such great opportunities to lift other women up. So
it is a female dominated industry, which is a good thing. At the moment though, I like, it's slightly controversial, we are like, in some ways, like, we've got to check ourselves in the sense that we've got to check, first of all, our money mindset, because like, I won't get into this right now, but this is one of my things that I'm here for, right? Women historically have been screwed on the money front. And historically paid less, don't have savings, whatever. And I like, there, for me, there is no surprise that the vast majority of the workforce are women. And then we're all saying we're struggling to make money. And this is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And I'm like, this don't make sense. And then like, when we feel under threat, when we, you know, we can turn against each other, and we do need to tap into our feminine energies of woman circles supporting each other, and then actually just wake up to our money mindset, instead of going, oh, men just earn more than us, it's just the way it is, it's the 1%, it's the patriarchy, these are, let's blame all these other people. Just say, actually, no, like, I could lead the way. I'm a newly qualified yoga teacher. I'm going to charge this.
Really, and also talk to other yoga teachers about how much you charge, because I've always felt, you know, outside of yoga, inside of yoga, the more transparency that you have with people on your level about what you're earning, the more like freeing and emancipating it is. Because if I know Sharon down the road is working at the same studio I'm working at for £20 more an hour, that's really useful information.
Yeah, absolutely. And this isn't, now to wrap up on the newly qualified stuff, on my mentorship program, I have people who've been teaching 20 years and I have people who've just trained, right? They all have issues with their money mindset. So don't look to an experienced teacher and think they got it sorted. Don't look to me and think that I've got it sorted. Like, I'm continually working on my prices. So let's sort of come into saturated markets and Brighton. So just out of curiosity, Flo, how have you established yourself in the saturated market that is Brighton?
I think the main thing that really helped me kind of spring off into like from training to teaching, well, it was two things. So the first thing was my trainer that I did my foundational training with offered me, when I did my final exam, she was like, you smashed it. I really like your style, it's similar to mine. Would you like to cover for me? And that was an amazing way to flow into studio work and just, as you often say, like cutting my craft. So that was number one. And I think that if you are training now, if you can, like, establish that dialogue with your trainers. If you vibe with them, which you should, because I think that you should train with people that you vibe with, ask them about covering, or just start a dialogue about what feedback would be useful, or what development, let's say, or changes would be useful to your teaching to get into that place where they would want you to cover for them.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think when I was thinking about this, what I was going to say on this podcast, I was thinking in foundation teacher training, there's like a big emphasis on lifting people up, which is obviously a great thing, and like lifting up their confidence. But sometimes I think that feedback can be like only positive or only encouraging. And so I think it's good as a student if you say to your trainer, you know, give me the unfiltered version. If you feel like you can, give me stuff to work on as well.
Yeah.
Because that is so valuable. And keep saying that as you teach. Like a teacher I know and admire always says at the end of her classes, would love your feedback, positive and negative, any questions coming to class. And I think that's a good thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. Like, I mean, as a trainer, I do try and give what I call constructive feedback. And we talked before I hit record about that. Amy, do you swear in your podcast? I was like, I don't know. And I was like, I'm going to swear now. I was like, we used to call it like a shit sandwich. So you say something positive, and it's not that you're saying something negative. You're giving them some specific constructive feedback, constructive criticism, and then you say something positive. Then when we go into the world as teachers, like, and whether we're yoga teachers or a teacher, we're then looking into that, what I call the reflective practitioner. So at the end of your class, like, you very well should ask yourself, like, what went well? And then maybe what didn't go so well, or better put, because we can beat ourselves up, is like, maybe what could I try differently next time? What if I did this next time? And, you know, actually this felt a bit sticky. What happens if I mix this up? And I'm going to quote Norman Blair, who I did my yin training with a few years ago. And he said, like, you know, the main question you've got to ask yourself is, did anyone die? And I love that. That's really stuck in with me, right? Honestly, there's a couple of things I've taken away from Norman Blair. One is that question, and the other one is shouldism, right? But did anyone die? Because we beat ourselves up. Like, that was awful. And then you're like gobsmacked that people came back. And then if someone doesn't come back, you assume it's because of you. And this is why you need support networks and mentorship, you know.
I must say, so the person who I teach children's yoga, because I also teach children's yoga with, she's called, I think she won't mind me saying, she's called Ollie. Her business is Balance Kids Yoga. And because she has a background in teaching young ones, she said to me, do stars and crystal balls, because that's the way that you do feedback with children. So you do and honestly, if you look through my yoga plans, I got stars and crystal balls everywhere. So you do your stars, like what I did really well, do them first if you've had a class, because
I love this. Stars and I'm going to write that down, stars and crystal balls.
And then crystal balls, what you want to do, you know, what you see in the future for you. So in the future, I see myself not taking 10 minutes to give that really simple cue, you know, like things like that. And it really helps you, whether it actually changes how you teach, it helps you gain perspective on what you've taught. Like, nobody died, that could be your star.
I love that. I love stars and crystals. I think it's like, also, I'm a new qualified teacher, but listen, every time I teach, I'm evolving. Every time I teach, I'm learning. And then I'm also human. So sometimes I turn up and I just teach and it's just enough, and it's not my best class, but that's fine. And sometimes I teach and I turn up and I'm on fire. And I'll tell you where I learned that from was, like, when I was a school teacher and I was working full time as a school teacher, like sometimes I'd have 5 classes back to back. You know, no way was I like teaching or singing or dancing whizzy bang amazing classes back to back. But you know what? I was always good enough. What's just popped into my mind, which I'm sure is another thing Norman had said, like, you've just got to be you've got to be as good as your bad class. Like, what's your bad class has got to be good enough, you know what I mean? but it's true. We've got to allow ourselves to be human. And I do think yoga teachers put themselves like really high up, like on in terms of expectations.
Yeah, I mean, like, honestly, why do you think that we say one of the kind of key mantras in yoga classes is I am enough?
But
Probably
we
the
don't
yoga
fight
teacher
ourselves,
speaking
and we're not applying it to ourselves.
yeah.
Now the other thing you wanted to talk about, which I love, Flo, the unsexy stuff. Look, I want you to know, right? I got a session with my foundation teacher training course. They're just about to do their final teaching practices, and we've got an online one, and I've literally labeled it the boring stuff. But I bet you it covers what you're like. What is this unsexy stuff you want to talk about? Not your leggings.
Not my sexy leggings. Yeah, so the unsexy stuff, I think this is another thing that is really undervalued or unvalued for newly qualified teachers, which is stuff like being punctual, replying to your emails promptly, being reliable, being honest, which are all things I think especially in studios, because you are in that structure of kind of reporting to a studio owner at least, but also if you have your own classes, like classes can fall apart if you are not punctual or if you're not reliable. If you cancel a class, I want to say like more than twice in a row, I think you'll probably lose, if not all, at least half your students.
You're right.
And I've spoken to loads of studio owners who are like, I had to let that person go because they weren't reliable, they weren't punctual. Yeah, so very simply put, do that, treat it.
No, job. And I'll tell you what I've written down is, first of all, I've written down systems, because when we see people not replying to emails perhaps in a time frame that we expect, or they're missing stuff, a lot of that sometimes comes because they haven't got the systems in place. So like, I mean, here I'm got to practice what I preach. I really need to set up that, someone sends me an email and it pings, I've received your email, I will respond. It's just me and my business, or I'm just part-time in my business, I'm full-time, but I'm just thinking how some of you guys might respond, and I will respond. I will do my best to respond within 72 hours. That takes out the panic from my end that you're not going to get back to me, and it takes out the panic from your end that you've got to reply to this email. So that's a system, and other systems, my diary. So, I know where I've got to be and when. What is your system in your diary? And then like, I think honesty is a great one. Because like, being honest with yourself. Like, if there is a reason that you're struggling to get to that class on time, struggling to turn up to that class, I would say that the reason is it's because it's not what you're meant to be doing. And you've said yes to something because you feel like you should, and you're pursuing something that isn't meant for you. So it comes across as like, oh, that person's unreliable. I can talk, Jane, who I run my foundation teacher training course, she won't mind me saying this. Like, she for good many years tried to teach regular classes and then would have bouts of sort of like chronic illness, and then it would feel like she'd be unreliable and she'd force herself back into this regular class teaching thing. And it wasn't until a few years ago where she's like, I'm just going to stop teaching a regular class. It doesn't work for me. And she does things differently now. One of the wonderful things she does is this magical miracle mornings, where when she feels energetically aligned, she says, I'm going to do these 5 mornings. So, but that said, we've got to have a care of profession. We've got to see it as a profession, and it is an unregulated industry. So it's hard to navigate training. It's hard to navigate mentorship. It's hard to figure out where to work and when to work. But being professional, and Flo, you and I come from other backgrounds where, you have to be on time because you've got children coming through the door. You have to report something that's serious in terms of safeguarding because there might be a child at risk. And, people come from all different walks of life and may actually have to learn these skills as being self-employed. Yeah,
absolutely. I think that's really interesting what you said about if you're be honest with yourself if you're not managing to very interesting.
And also, like, if you have, like, sometimes if you have we all have stuff happen. I nearly swore again. We all have shit happen. Let's swear. This is now officially a swearing podcast. Flo has not sworn. I've sworn twice. We all have stuff happen, and it might be that we can't teach for an extended period of time because of our health, because of a family member's health. But we come from this silly point of view that I'm a yoga teacher and I should just have it all together, so I shouldn't be suffering. So then people don't say what the reason is why they're being unreliable, because we're meant to have a yoga teacher and have it all together, and we're meant to, regardless of external events, just, and I think allowing it goes back to the being human.
Yeah, and it makes me think, you know, even if that's part of the professionalism as well, is communicating that clearly. Yeah, for example, I was offered a class at a studio at 7 o'clock in the morning. Oh my goodness, what a fantastic opportunity. I'd love to work with these teachers, and thought about it and was like feeling uncomfortable. And in the end, I said to them, do you know what, I would love that opportunity, and I'd love to work for you, but I'm just not a morning person. And because I knew I wouldn't be able to keep up being reliable, and it's fine to say that. And I think it's so important to just keep the communication there, even if it's like you say, communicating that you can't communicate.
Yeah,
I'm really sorry, I'm completely overwhelmed right now. I'll try and get back to you within the week.
Absolutely. I love that. Let's take that on board, guys. Communicating that we can't communicate. And like, I do have to say, like, guys, sometimes no response is a response. If you reach out to someone and they don't get back to you initially, it's not because they don't care. It's not because they don't want your business. It's not because they don't want to vibe with you. If it's another yoga teacher, there might be another reason. So look, lastly, Flo, this is just so much. This is a gold dust episode. And so I love these ones. Last thing I've got written down, but do let me know if we've missed something, is this diversifying your offer. And I think, like, from working with you on that pathway to profit, one of the challenges have been for you, I think, is like, in a market that's very much driven where there's yoga studios and you're looking for work within yoga studios. And we also could fall into a trap of waiting for that opportunity, waiting for validation for a studio to give us an opportunity. And like, if we do want to expand our income, like, just teaching in yoga studios in Brighton would be a challenging way to make a living. No, you can make some money, but a challenging way to make a living. So deversifying your offers. Do you have a question, or do you want to tell me, like, from your point of view, 3 years in, what are you thinking about doing? What's next?
So diversifying your offer is something that I heard a lot when I'd qualified, and I think is a great idea, but also felt very overwhelming, because you can diversify your offer in Sainsbury's down the road if you wanted to, but it might not be a very good idea, you know, because do people at Sainsbury's actually want yoga? Like, maybe they do.
I like to think they do. I should say this.
But so I think it's useful to say to people, first of all, look for where there's need, or maybe not first of all, but I'd say do 2 things. So look where there is like a need or an interest, and also look in your, I think it's called like a zone of genius. I don't know where it comes
from. Zone of genius, absolutely.
Yeah. Because
my perimenopausal brain has gone. The guy who the book, oh god, that's really annoying. Keep talking, it will come back.
Yeah, I'll trigger. Look within your zone of genius. So I'll give an example from my experience, which was that I'm also a linguist. I speak different languages, and in Brighton there are lots of language schools, English language, but anyway, and so I thought, hey, it might be a good idea to offer them yoga. And actually it was one of the best ideas that I had in that post training phase, because it just turned out that these structures, like language schools, or like universities, or I'm trying to think of other places, maybe you'll have some ideas, they have, like, because they're residential, they have like a whole pastoral element that they want to provide for. So they love the idea of students doing yoga, and it was such a touching thing to do, because I'd often have students who were like living in dormitories with 7 other people, they were in a new country that they'd never been to before. They were young, they were like feeling overwhelmed, and they would come to those yoga classes every week and just breathe and relax and like connect with other people in the building that they hadn't met before. And yeah, it was a really affirming thing to do. It was also a fantastic thing for me to do, because I felt it was a lower pressure environment than a studio to cut my craft, to practice things, to practice modifications, to practice cueing to people who don't speak English as their first language. You learn to cut out the shit.
Yeah,
and the extra word.
So I'll have to say this podcast definitely contains the S word. That's the only swear word. No, what you did there, and I just quickly Googled it because it was really bothering me. Gay Hendricks, the Big Leap. It's a really good book. In fact, I will do a podcast episode on the whole idea of the zone of genius. But the idea, very briefly, is your zone of genius is where you're meant to be working, where work doesn't feel like work, where things flow, where opportunities come your way. You know, it's not effort, it just happens. But it takes a lot of confidence to say yes to that and no to other stuff that isn't in my zone of genius. The other thing I would say about this diversifying your offers, that it depends. So I could give you an example of like a business model, a yoga teacher, for example. I could find someone, right, who's all they offer is an online membership that's completely scalable. It's a, you know, I can't think of a yoga one off the top of my head, but I was in an email marketing one, Lizzie Wilcox, and it was $9 a month, and she had over nearly 3,000 people in this membership, and she was making, you know, 24 grand a month off it, right? And there was one offer. There's no diversification there. She had a low cost membership and she had a lot of people in it. I mean, that requires a big audience, right? And that I'd get bored, but it really worked for her. Okay. The other thing, when you're newly qualified, you're not ready to diversify your offer. And if you try to diversify your offers, you're going to get stressed. And what you did then, I hope everyone was listening, was you went out and cut your craft from a place of, we could say, what was your niche? You had this, what was your USP, your unique selling point? You can speak French, you're bilingual, and you tapped into that. Very, very sensible. 3 years in, Flo, you've hooked up with me because you're like, I want to diversify my offers, and we're all on a path. You're ready to meet that. So what's the next stage? I've got X amount of classes. Where can I take that? And, you know, we talked about the whole multitude of ways you can make money as a yoga teacher. We talked about, you know, workshops and online classes that could create online passive income. I am just actually having this conversation so much with people that I'm like, just start an online class. You've got nothing to lose. It doesn't matter if no one turns up. You turn up and you teach it, you record it, and now all of a sudden you've got a recorded class. 5 weeks in, 6 weeks down the line, you've got a series. 100 weeks down the line, you've got 100 classes. You've got a yoga library. You've got a membership that you could build over 5 years. You know, 5 years down the line, you've got 1,000 people in it giving you £22 a month.
Yeah, and it's a smart thing to do as well if you are planning to then move into studios, because I've had studios ask me, can you send me a recording of one of your classes? Well, if you're a newly qualified teacher and you're not in any studios, you don't have any recording. So
and I've spoken a bit about Jane today. Like, we record all our yoga teacher training course, and she's looking at some work abroad, for example, and she's just sent that off. You know, it doesn't matter what stage you are. If you're a trainer, record your stuff, you know, and repurpose it, reuse it, either to seek work elsewhere, resell stuff. Flo, this has been mind-blowing. So much. I feel like I've been for a run. Flo and I had a 1 hour mentorship mentoring meeting as part of a Pathway to Profit, and she felt like she'd been for a run after it. I like, there is so much covered. I've got like another 6 podcast episodes off the back of this.
Let's do a series.
Yeah, let's do a series. Let's do a course and sell it. But look, I want to just say from the bottom of my heart, and I know everyone listening to this will be so grateful that you showed up and had these conversations, because we're too busy pretending it's all okay, pretending we've all got it together, and behind closed doors going, well, I'm gonna say the S word again, I'm shit. I might as well just give up, And it's not until we say, look, actually, this is my experience. This is what happens to me. This is what happens in my brain. And like, this is how I navigate it, that we all start to go, we're all just human.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I want to say, I mean, we didn't get onto it. That'll be for the next bit.
Yeah, next one.
But like, I have written down in my notes for this, just be forgiving of yourself.
Yes.
Because I mean, I think that that's probably going to be a theme throughout your entire career as a yoga teacher, but especially when you are starting out, it's just everything that you're experiencing is normal.
Yes. And look, just to conclude and follow on from that, those of you that listen to podcasts know I love reading, but not fictional books, because I get too involved in fictional books and like they make me cry and they keep me up at night. So I read like lots and lots of like factual books, often about business and money, and sometimes it goes really wacky. But right now, someone had lent me the Diary of a CEO by Stephen, can't remember his last name. And I've just read the chapter about purpose, failing hard, and the people who are successful are the ones that fail the most and use their failures to move forward, to thrive. And you have to, instead of seeing your failures as something as bad, seeing your failures as something that's good. That's you're on your path. So Flo, you are so on your path. I want to say 3 years in, the first thing you should celebrate is that you're still a yoga teacher. Not just that, you've got an established timetable in established studios. Definitely need celebrating. You've got a lovely Instagram with a good amount of followers, and obviously we're going to really utilize those leggings now, but why not? You could be an influencer for leggings. You've got a website. I googled you found on Google, and you're at a point where you're starting to think, how can I broaden that? How can I help more people make more money? And a lot of people don't get to your stage. A lot of people do their training and don't even go out and teach, because there's so many blocks in this beautiful brain of ours. So you are absolutely smashing it. And you lead a light. This is what's hard maybe even to get your head around, right? Right now, you lead a light for all those people that are currently training. You lead a light for everyone who's 2 years behind you. You could help these teachers.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I hope I do. And I feel quite committed to that. So if people want to reach out, please do.
Flo can mentor you. Maybe you prefer to be mentored by Flo because you're like, maybe you can't remember what it's like, and there really is something in that, and I think that's where we could easily tell ourselves a story that we're not ready, but there's always someone who's a couple of years behind us that we are ready to meet in our yoga classes and in our yoga business. So Flo, I think you're gonna have to come back. Maybe come back in 12 months time, so people can see how you have diversified your offers. That's something that's, no pressure. And if nothing's changed, then that's what it was meant to be. But that's always a good one to see you on your journey.
Yeah, that's a lovely idea. I think we should both do it until we're in like our 90s.
Yeah, we'll just keep going. And we'll be like, I'll be like, Flo, I dragged Flo out to a surf retreat in Barbados. She didn't want to surf or come to Barbados, but that's where I am now.
Hey, I wouldn't be complaining.
Age 60. All right, Flo, thank you so much. If you want to check Flo out, please follow her on Instagram, because she's going to be starting some online stuff, so you can do some yoga with her. Also reach out to her on Instagram, because if you're a newly qualified teacher or in those first few years and you think you'd really like a bit of support from Flo, she's been where you are right now. And so I'll put all of that in the show notes. And thank you so much for coming on, Flo, because these interview podcasts I know are the ones that people get bored of me. Thank you so much, darling.
Thank you.